This is Donald J. Trump, the 45th and 47th President of the United States. During his 2024 campaign, Trump spoke about deporting the worst of the worst.
I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, that's where we had to go, to target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil.
In response, all the usual suspects came out against the AEA, including the Brennan Center and the American Civil Liberties Union. The Alien Enemies Act is outdated, dangerous, and ripe for abuse. Donald Trump has threatened to use the 1798 law to conduct mass deportations with little due process. Anti-immigration extremists want to use this 226-year-old law to implement a mass deportation program. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 was used to justify World War II era internment of non-citizens. And now Donald Trump is threatening to invoke the law to target immigrant communities. And even though Trump has been very clear about using the AEA against transnational criminal gangs, the ACLU's article doesn't even mention Tren de Aragua or MS-13 or even the word criminal. In the ACLU's eyes, they're all immigrant communities. And the Democrats wonder why Trump is the president again. So fast forward to March 15th, 2025, when the White House published Trump's invocation of the AEA. A reported 137 suspected members of the Tren de Aragua gang were treated as enemy aliens and deported to El Salvador. But the media attempted to give these violent gang members a makeover.
A chaotic scene as Venezuelan migrants arrived in El Salvador over the weekend.
Deportation flights carrying hundreds of Venezuelan migrants.
Hundreds of migrants deported to El Salvador over the weekend.
The deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants.
The swift deportation of nearly 300 undocumented migrants.
2 removal flights took off en route to El Salvador, which had agreed to take in these Venezuelan migrants.
Migrant deportations to a prison camp in El Salvador.
The deportation of migrants to El Salvador.
The Trump administration recently deported more than 200 immigrants.
More than 200 immigrants deported en masse from the U.S.
The deportation flights of Venezuelan immigrants to El Salvador.
Is there any mechanism to bring these migrants back if they have legitimate asylum claims?
Yeah, I'm sure that a valid asylum claim will cancel out any gang affiliation. Anyway, the ACLU filed a lawsuit against the United States government over Trump's invocation of the AEA before he even invoked it. The ACLU's complaint states, the proclamation is expected to authorize immediate removal of non-citizens that the proclamation deems to be alien enemies without any opportunity for judicial review. It also contorts the plain language of the AEA. Arrivals of non-citizens from Venezuela are deemed an invasion or a predatory incursion by a foreign nation or government. That's right, the ACLU sued the Trump administration over something they hadn't even done yet. The ACLU's reasoning was not based on Trump's actual proclamation, but based on a CNN report about what a proclamation might look like. They also based their complaint on President Trump's recent address to the Department of Justice, quoting him as saying, "You will read in the papers tomorrow the bad thing we will do to Tren de Aragua." However, the ACLU misquoted Trump. Here is what the president actually said.
Important days in the history of our country. So I think, and I think everybody in this room wants that to happen. Last month, we officially designated MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. That's the Venezuelan gang, the toughest gang, they say, in the world, and the Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That's a big deal. Nobody wanted to do that in the past. And by the way, we've caught hundreds of them, the Venezuelan gang, which is as bad as it gets, and you'll be reading a lot of stories tomorrow about what we've done with them, and you'll be very impressed, and you'll feel a lot safer too, because they are a vicious group.
If you're gonna quote the President of the United States in a legal complaint, it better be accurate. If I were Trump, I'd sue the ACLU for libel. So the ACLU's complaint was filed around 9:30 a.m. on March 15th, and U.S. District Court Judge James E. Boasberg almost immediately scheduled a 5 p.m. emergency hearing, despite the fact that the White House hadn't even published President Trump's presidential proclamation. So of course, the judge determined that an immediate temporary restraining order was warranted, and ordered that the government shall not remove any of the individual plaintiffs from the United States for 14 days absent further order of the court. Furthermore, according to the Department of Justice, and confirmed by an attorney representing one of the plaintiffs, the flights did not contain any of the individual plaintiffs listed on the ACLU's complaint. So no problem, right? Well, not so fast, because the judge then turned it into a class action lawsuit, and now includes all non-citizens in US custody that would be subject to Trump's proclamation. In other words, everybody. So what's the reason why Judge Boasberg magically changed it into a class action? Oh, you know why. Subsequently, the media was all up in arms, claiming that the Trump administration defied the court's order and wouldn't turn any of the planes around, despite the fact that there is no mention of turning any planes around in the court's written order. So Stephen Miller, Trump's Homeland Security advisor, points out that the courts have no authority over the AEA because the district court has no jurisdiction over Article 1 executive powers.
The Alien Enemies Act, which was passed into law by the founding generation of this country, men like John Adams, was written explicitly to give the president the authority to repel an alien invasion of the United States. That is not something that a district court judge has any authority whatsoever to interfere with, to enjoin, to restrict, or to restrain any way. You can read the law yourself. There's not one clause in that law that makes it subject to judicial review, let alone district court review.
Exactly. The Alien Enemies Act allows the president to issue a proclamation defining the scope of its enforcement, including conditions under which affected individuals may be detained or deported. It does not require a hearing or evidence of individual misconduct. In fact, Judge Boasberg admitted this during the hearing. The president has unreviewable authority to determine whether a state of war actually exists, and if so, to remove enemy aliens in the matter he wishes. So the question is, does such authority extend to other determinations within the statute, such as invasion or predatory incursion or foreign nation or government? And that, unfortunately, is a question of first impression here. So Judge Boasberg knew that the AEA falls under executive powers, yet he issued a temporary restraining order anyway. His actions here are way out of bounds, and objectively, it's very inappropriate judicial overreach.
Well, so first of all, there's a term in law, justiciable. This is not justiciable. In other words, this is not subject to judicial remedy. When the president is exercising his Article 2 powers to defend the country against an invasion or to repel a foreign terrorist that is unlawfully in the country, he's exercising his core Article 2 powers as commander-in-chief.
Is Venezuela invading the U.S.?
Well, if Casey Hunt had any journalistic curiosity or objectivity, she would know that the answer is yes. The order signed by President Trump states, "I find and declare the TDA is perpetrating, attempting, and threatening an invasion of predatory incursion against the territory of the United States. TDA is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare against the territory of the United States and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela."
Tren de Aragua is an alien enemy force that has come here, as detailed at length in the proclamation, at the direction of the Venezuelan government.
Correct. The proclamation explains that Maduro leads the regime-sponsored enterprise Cartel de las Soles, i.e. Cartel of the Suns, which coordinates with and relies on TDA and other organizations to carry out its objective of using illegal narcotics as a weapon to flood the United States. Over the years, Venezuelan national and local authorities have ceded ever greater control over their territories to transnational criminal organizations, including TDA. The result is a hybrid criminal state that is perpetrating an invasion of and predatory incursion into the United States, and which poses a substantial danger to the United States. But instead of taking any of that into account, Casey Hunt is like, but have we declared war with Venezuela?
Of what triggers that
So
determination
do you then
in the
think we
statute.
are actually at war with Venezuela, the nation state of Venezuela?
You're not hearing me and you're not understanding me. Read the statute. Alien Enemies Act, 1798. It says if a predatory incursion is perpetrated by a foreign government, so it lists three qualifying actions. It could be an act
it does
of war.
say in the very beginning there has to be a declared war against a nation or a state. That's what it says.
No, wrong.
And Stephen Miller is right. The Alien Enemies Act states that whenever there should be a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, or any invasion, or any predatory incursion shall be perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government.
The statute says that a president has the ability to repel an invasion or predatory incursion that is directed by a foreign
state
government.
or a government, right? Are they a state or a government?
This would be, yes, it is documented. The TDA was sent by the Venezuelan government in the proclamation.
Again, she would know that, yes, a state government was behind TDA's invasion of the US, but she didn't read the proclamation. She just had a producer in her ear the whole time going, oh, I know, ask him if we've declared war with Venezuela.
You said the way our system works is the President of the United States commands the armed forces of the country, commands the foreign policy of the country, and that's subject to district court review. That is fundamentally untrue.
I never said that, Stephen. I did not say...
That has never been true.
But Casey Hunt did say that this is how our system works. It starts with these judges and continues up. Allow me to play the clip.
When you say that this person has no authority at all, this is how our system works. It starts with these judges and then continues up. And I fail to see how there's any other way but to start with where we're starting here before you get to eventually the Supreme Court.
I never said that. A district court judge can no more enjoin the expulsion of foreign terrorists to foreign soil that he can direct the movement of Air Force One, that he can direct the movement of an aircraft carrier, that he can direct Marco Rubio to engage in diplomacy in a country or not.
Do you think the Supreme Court has any say over this or not?
You think that the Supreme Court... Oh my God, she's unwatchable.
Like, does the Supreme Court of the United States have any say over the things that you were just outlining right here?
I believe what the Supreme Court will say is what I just said, which is that the president's conduct here is not subject to judicial review.
Okay, but you are acknowledging that they do in fact have a say here, even though you think they may agree with you.
Again, what Stephen Miller is saying is that the district court has no jurisdiction over executive powers, and that the Supreme Court is eventually going to step in and rule that, in this matter, that the district court was out of bounds.
What we are expecting is the Supreme Court to say what has always been the case, which is when the president is using his powers as commander-in-chief, those determinations are not subject to judicial review.
But surprisingly, this is not a concept that Casey Hunt remotely understands.
I'm just trying to figure out at what point in the system do you, because what does the Trump administration believe? Because we do have separation of powers in this country. I hear what you're saying.
Yes,
you're saying
separation
the district
of powers.
Court does not
this is the judiciary
have authority.
interfering
Stephen,
in
let me finish.
the executive function.
Let me
that
finish.
is the separation of powers. That is the separation of powers.
Did you ignore the judge's order here because you thought you could?
So the judge's order and the actions taken by the Departments of Defense, Justice, and Homeland Security are not in conflict. But
so you think that you did go along with the order that the judge put out? You do not think that the Trump administration defied this order?
As the Justice Department said, there is no conflict between the judge's order and the actions taken by the departments I just listed.
So even though Stephen Miller stated several times that the administration didn't violate the court order, Casey Hunt keeps asking the same question over and over again.
Is the White House above the federal courts? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that what you said, there's a separation of powers.
And one more time for the people who missed it, Casey.
Did you ignore, did the administration ignore the order from the district judge? It's a simple question.
I've answered it.
And on that note, that's it for now. Follow me on Twitter at Don't Walk Run. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. If there is next time.